Master politician and was an outstanding statesman. He was a great leader, another hero you understand. That's why we remember.
Here I am with you once again. This is February the 24th, and you know we're in the month of celebration to commemorate the birth anniversary of Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham as we speak. And first of all, before I say anything else this morning, I want to extend congratulations to the chairman of the foundation for having received his Hour of Achievement Award, National Award, to Mr. Vincent Alexander, and this program wishes to congratulate him on that achievement. Now, today's program is a very interesting one. We will be looking at Forbes Burnham policies and its relevance today. But before I go into that, I want to tell you what has been happening with the foundation over the past days. You know, this month we are commemorating the birth anniversary of Forbes Burnham. We started with a church service at the Kitty Methodist Church, where his father worshipped and he himself worshipped. I've been advised that he also assisted the church members in terms of rehabilitating that building to bring it to the way it is today. We started with that. We also had our conference, which has been rescheduled for completion on another date to be announced. But you know, today this program is happening. We have just started a race. The second leg of our annual three-stage cycle race is on its way from Linden to Carifest Avenue. That is the second stage, and this afternoon at 2 o'clock, we'll be going to Belfield and back. You know, at Belfield is where he lived for some time, and we feel that our last stage for the race should go there and come back to Georgetown. Added on today's program, we'll be also having our table tennis is being played off right now at the gymnasium. We also have our softball cricket. We have over 40 schools participating from region 3, 4, and 5. But it is a hot competition. A lot of schools have been doing well, but it's coming on. We will have the finals for those competitions coming on March the 3rd, when they will be having the finals. And best of luck to those schools who have not yet played. I hope you do your best coming through, that you get through to the final. But let the best team win. Today with me in the studio I have a gentleman who has served as the General Secretary of the People's National Congress Reform. He also served recently as Presidential Advisor to Mr. Granger of Youth Empowerment. And he has been in the field. He has been doing a number of things in relation to promoting development of Guyana. He has also been well aware, very schooled at the feet of Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. And today we'll be looking at Forbes Burnham, his policies and his relevance. And I have with me none other than Mr. Aubrey Norton, member of the Central Executive of the People's National Congress Reform. Aubrey, Forbes Burnham, interesting character, outstanding character. Caribbean man of the 20th century. Listening to people on the road today, they said, had Forbes Burnham been alive, the things he have been preaching still irrelevant. What are your thoughts? Forbes Burnham policies.
Well, Forbes Burnham, I think, originally outlined 6 clear policies, and then he developed on them. But I think to understand Burnham's policies, first of all, you have to understand the context in which Burnham emerged as Premier and then Prime Minister. Guyana had gone through racial disturbances. To use Burnham words, the PNC, when it came to power, brought Guyana back from the brink of ruins, because you had the ethnic struggles, the race riots of the 60s, particularly 1964. And it is in that context of the ethnic groups, or the 2 main ethnic groups in a clash, that Burnham came to power. And one of the first policies Burnham outlined was that of promoting national unity. In this regard, Burnham roamed Guyana. He went to all communities, and I recall when it was said that he would not be welcome in Indian communities, Burnham went, the secondary school, the school at Lenore, not secondary, I think it was primary, was burnt down. And Burnham went to Lenore and not only visited with people, but he motivated people in Lenore to rebuild that school by self-help. It still stands. And so, as he pursued this policy of national unity, he moved across the country. One of the means he used to get people involved was self-help, which I think is relevant today. If you look at some of the housing schemes that were built under Burnham, he created the conditions for people to be on their jobs and do self-help and build their own home. And so, in pursuance of national unity, he did a number of things to bring Guyanese together, including the national service, which was bastardized by the PPP, by the way. And so the first policy I wanted to outline is that Burnham believed in and promoted national unity. He wanted the ethnic groups to live together and work together.
And that is still very relevant
Yes,
today.
it is.
This
And-
concept of national
And he was
unity.
doing it in a very hostile environment. A lot of times when people talk about Burnham, they talk as if he had no opposition. There was severe opposition to Burnham from day one. Some of you might remember them spreading that he was the 5th richest black man in the world. Until this date, no wealth has been found, which signaled to you that, you know, all they were doing was bastardizing Burnham. But Burnham saw that one element of the Guyanese life was them living and working together. And whereas at the time, Burnham was a socialist, and Dr. Jagan, socialist, communist, Burnham was distinctly different in the sense that Burnham didn't take what happened in Moscow, what happened in Yugoslavia. He sought from the Guyanese society to develop a brand of socialism, which he think will work.
That's a very interesting point, and I want to zoom in on that because our viewers maybe don't. How would you differentiate the two kind of concepts between socialism, Burnham being a socialist, and Dr. Jagan, socialist communist?
Well, Burnham being a socialist, I draw the distinction to establish that Burnham, one, felt that you can use the ideas of Marx, Lenin, etc., but you have to put it in the Guyanese context.
Okay.
Dr. Jagan was a rigid dogmatist who, on many occasions, just did what the Soviet Union or the Russians wanted him to do. And he himself said later he thinks it was one of his mistakes. But the point is, Burnham developed a concept of cooperative socialism and cooperativism, where he felt that Guyanese had a history of working together, saving money together, and he felt that if we can kindle the cooperative ethic and transform it into a kind of vision for Guyana, then we'll be better off. And that fits nicely into promoting national unity. So Burnham portrayed or outlined what he called a socialist cooperative approach, in which at the center of it was his intention to make the small man a real man. And if you look at a lot of the things that Burnham did at the time in housing, in education, they were all aimed at making the poor better off. And so at the bottom of his philosophical thinking was this desire to promote the well-being of ordinary people.
I want here to kind of point out, because Forbes Burnham, you said earlier on that he recognized that historically Guyanese were inclined to work in a cooperative way, work together, the villages and so on. And that is a concept that he built on to develop this idea of cooperativism, this concept of cooperativism in Guyana. I just wanted to make sure that...
And you can link it to President Granger talking about sustainable villages. When we come to self-reliance, we'll deal with that a little more. But this idea of working together, operating together, and in that process of identifying cooperativism, he pushed the cooperative movement. And what was significant about his pushing of the cooperative movement was that he wanted the small man to benefit, and therefore there were limits on how many, not member shares you can own in a co-op, so that you couldn't like buy out the small man willy-nilly and just take over. In fact, this is so relevant because I'm dealing with another matter on the West Demerara, where a similar thing is happening in total violation to the intention of cooperativism and the laws. So Burnham promoted the co-op movement. Of course, under the PPP, they virtually destroyed it. And now it is being rekindled and given new life, because cooperativism offers the opportunity for people with little or no resources to get resources and develop small businesses, etc. Burnham also felt, if you go back in history, when Burnham came to power, basically Guyana was owned by foreigners. It was Bemba at Linden in the bauxite industry, Reynolds in Berbice, Jessers in the sugar industry, you name it. 80% or more of the Guyana economy was owned by foreigners. Where I grew up in Linden, you had to get a pass. It's something that people don't know. Watuka is where the whites lived. But you had to get a pass to go in there. And because of the domination of the economics of the country, Guyanese were second class in their own country. Burnham, of course, being a socialist, felt that the wealth of Guyana should be owned by the people of Guyana. Of course, at the time, the US, Britain, etc. were opposed to it, and so there was a clash. So Burnham nationalized with the aim of taking the resources of this country and have them managed by Guyanese. In the process, he trained thousands of Guyanese. Some of them went away, never come back, but many of them came back, worked, developed the skills. So for Burnham,
a school of thought that's where persons who had said that Forbes Burnham, he was not inclined to nationalize these industries.
Well, the truth of the matter is, I don't think Burnham started with nationalization in mind as you go through the...
Well, that's what I've heard people say.
And people forget when they talk, Dr. Jagan was saying to Burnham, take them, don't pay a cent. Burnham was saying, no, you have to compensate people for what they think. But the point is, what I wanted to point out is that Burnham believed that the resources of a country should be controlled by its people in the interest of the people. Unlike what people claim, Burnham didn't see a state economy. He saw state, cooperative, and private enterprise, all of which existed under him. He spoke about a trisectorial economy. And so Burnham's view really was Guyana should benefit from the resources of Guyana, which is an issue that is relevant today.
Still
you
relevant.
have Exxon coming, while it's not an era in which things like nationalization will occur. You also still have got to put the mechanisms in place to ensure the people of Guyana benefit from our resources. So the concept there still exists, though in a different context. Now, Burnham, again, when he came to power, the hinterland was virtually separated from the coast and town. And Burnham developed another policy called hinterland development, where in a structured and focused way, he began the process of opening the interior, putting roads so that you could drive straight to the Rupununi. I remember as a boy, we left Linden and drove to Bartico. I think they're now going to redo the road since it was allowed to degenerate. And so Burnham had opened a network of roads. You could have left Madia. Well, the bridge wasn't built by Burnham, that is across that river. It was there before. But the roads were developed, and you began to access the hinterland. What that meant is that the Amerindian communities will start to see development that went in the hinterland. All communities in the hinterland we're going to see development. And so Burnham's vision was not a country in which the tongue and the coast at this high level and then below. People forget that when Burnham came to power in this country, if you had 6 secondary schools, you had plenty. And a lot of times people had to come to tongue, etc. Burnham established a network of secondary schools in this country and then later at the multilateral. I'm saying this to say that Burnham's vision was one in which he wanted to promote people's interests, improve their lives, and ensure that they can live comfortable. So it is in that context one must see him opening the hinterland, creating avenues for housing, etc. in hinterland communities. And of course he had focused in his head the electrification of Guyana with his attempts to get the hydro done, the criticisms of the opposition, the Venezuelans making their own noises about it, all of that jeopardized it. But what should be extracted from it is that Burnham recognized the need for cheap electricity. And I say this to come to the policy of self-reliance. Burnham felt that you could not be independent and rely on others. That you had to develop first yourself and be reliant on yourself, and then your communities must develop themselves and the nation at large.
I just want to intervene at this point. For viewers who are looking at this program, we will be opening the lines in another 10 minutes while Mr. Norton is speaking in relation to the relevance of Burnham policies today. So you can participate, ask your questions and comments in relation to what we are discussing today. Because today, you know that Forbes Burnham was born on the 20th of February, 1923, and this is the month of his birth, and this is also the month of our African brothers and sisters. So it is relevant today for us to talk about Forbes Burnham kind of policies, and Aubrey, you're on the question of self-reliance.
Yeah, so Burnham felt, again I must remind people, when Burnham came to power, we imported vegetables.
Yeah.
By the time Burnham, say the late 1970s, Ghana was producing the food it needed. Of course, there were those who said you didn't have food. What they meant was that you didn't have foreign food and canned stuff. which the world is now telling you don't bother with. But Burnham always emphasized that you need to rely on yourself. People forget the noise in this country when Burnham banned salt fish. I had a discussion with the one man who sells and exports salt fish. And I'd say to him, this industry, you name the other president in this country who has created industries in the way Burnham did.
Well,
hold a minute. I just mentioned salt fish. What he did with fruits.
That's right, yes. I just wanted to say that.
He virtually got rid of rains and prunes and local fruit producers emerged, and people going into agro-processing and processing, so that some Guyanese don't even know that carambola and five finger, all of them that we use, were not as popular. And it is the programs of Burnham that caused them to emerge and the industries that emerged with them. And so Burnham had in mind self-reliance as a basis for industrialization. And there are numerous things that he presented on this question of industrialization. Some the developed world stopped even though they couldn't find technical difficulties with it. They were technically sound. But the main thing here, and I think is still relevant, is that Burnham felt there was no need for Guyana to be buying chicken from overseas. There's no need for us to be buying pork from overseas. There's no need for us to be buying. And what he did was create the conditions propitious to ensuring that these industries emerge and consolidate, and they did.
That's an interesting point, because what you're saying there, I am now beginning to see the picture. where for the establishment of things like the agri-bank and so on. These are all kind of policies that fitted into this whole concept of self-reliance as a nation. And that's interesting. And I think that our viewers are really taking this in. Now, the other thing that I think you should really focus on, I'm now seeing the kind of relevance, not just establishing these institutions, because one of the signal achievement of Forbes Burnham is the establishment of the NIS for workers.
Oh yes. In fact, again, people forget Dr. Jagan roamed this country calling NIS sin. But NIS was and is probably one of the best contributions Burnham would have made. Of course, there are those who wouldn't credit him with it, and there are those who actually try to destroy it by misusing the resources. But let's go back to the issue of self-reliance. It was so critical to Burnham. I mean, from his dress.
Oh, yes.
Burnham, those who say that Burnham was pro-European and pro-North American, something's wrong with them. Burnham felt there was no need for suit and tie. In other words, you would have been improperly clad.
I would have properly clad.
You see, Burnham felt in a hot country like this, and it's a view I share. And Burnham felt in a country like this, you really need clothing that was appropriate. And so he worked on adopting the shirt jack and shirt jack suits, etc., to Guyana. Of course, you have to remember, Burnham felt he was going to take us out to colonialism, but he had a famous statement. He said, you can take men out to colonialism, but you can't take the colonialism out of them. And so even in the attempt to change to appropriate clothing, the mentality of some was that, I mean, you explain it every day, I don't like suit and ties. But if you put on one, you get a message from somebody on phone and say, you look good. And because it's a perception.
Yes.
Good, looking good is this thing of keeping your thing here, keeping in the heat, which you need to get out in this country. And so Burnham had this ability to adapt ideas to his environment. And in that regard...
Which is critical. That is also a cultural change which will be required in terms of promoting this concept of nationality and self-reliance.
And even as we talk about a green economy, a lot of these concepts will re-emerge. Don't forget, Burnham had said to people, these are the benefits of coconut and coconut oil.
Yes.
And if I recall, he still used coconut oil a lot. Today, there's a big noise and everybody wants coconut oil and lemon juice. But these are things that Burnham told us in the 70s. These were things that Burnham outlined, that we were better off relying on ourselves, eating the food we produce, and then taking a lot of those products, process them, and develop industry for export. But I am coming to the last policy Burnham outlined, non-alignment. And it's probably the policy that
That's an interesting
generated some problems for him. At the time, the world was divided into East and West. The East led by the USSR, the West by the United States. There was a Cold War ongoing. Burnham's position was, look, neither of the two of them will define our interests. We will sit down and see what is in the interest of Guyana and operate based on our interests. And Burnham in 1972, in a speech to the Non-Aligned Summit, outlined clearly what he meant by non-alignment. Some people say he hasn't defined policies. It's a lot of garbage. You can find booklets in which Burnham outlined clearly what he taught. And in the case of non-alignment, let us not forget it wasn't just East and West. Even in the non-aligned movement, you had the Cubans who were close to the Soviets and were saying that the non-aligned movement were natural allies. Then you had Yugoslavia,
Yes.
who was saying that non-alignment means equidistance. Keep equal distance from the West, equal distance from the East. The Chinese were saying we were part of the third world and we should be in it. Burnham's position was simple. Our national interest comes first. And non-alignment for us means we look at the world see where our interest lies and operate based on our interests and not be used by any power in the thing. Of course, non-alignment in a genuine sense was difficult in a world where you were a developing country, they control the resources. And a lot of that led to changes. So I'm saying to you, Burnham had a clear vision as to where he wanted Guyana to go. If we go back, he wanted a united society in which people were cooperating and working together, in which we own and control our resources and use them in the interest of the people, while at the same time doing this based on self-reliance and the opening of the hinterland. In a world that was a Cold War world in which he wanted to be non-aligned. And so Burnham outlined clearly, and as Burnham progressed, Burnham recognized that, and he said it very early, one of the best ways to empower people is education. And by 1976, he made education free from university, from nursery to university. The empowering element of that, people seem to miss. I know a lot of people, including myself, who, had it not been for free education, and I'm talking here at the university level, because when I left Linden, I didn't come into nobody with resources, no family with resources. You were coming, only thing you know you want an education, and because it was free, you could have taken it. I know many people now who would like to go to the university. You have to give them scholarships, etc., because they just lack the resources. And so Burnham felt that education played a critical role in removing you from poverty. He felt if you rely on yourself, you get involved in little businesses, you produce what you want. Burnham used to drive this country. I have had a garden all of my years except one time when I lived in an area where there was no fence. But once I had a fence from a little boy coming up. Even to now, I have a garden. And I believe that the impact of it, people miss. And so, in the context of education, Burnham felt education will bring equality. One of my disagreements with Burnham's approach, which I've said before, is that because he was socialist and at the time, they were preaching equality of opportunity. And I do agree that equality of opportunity brought some benefits. But I felt, in retrospect, we need to promote equity. And I like to say to people, we must promote equity as distinct from equal opportunity. And I always tell the story of two people going to watch a cricket match. The fence is 6 feet. One man is 4 feet. The other man is 6 feet. If you give both of them a ladder 2 feet, one man can still see over and the other one ain't. If it was equity, he would have gotten a ladder that permitted him to see over. And so we have to shift the equity, because there are a lot of disadvantaged groups and people. The Amerindans in this country are severely disadvantaged. Of course, President Granger is doing the things to ensure that we bridge that gap. So equity, to me, is where we should have gone. But they say hindsight is always great. So I'm saying that, yes, Burnham would have made his mistakes, like any political leader. But there is no questioning of his vision for Guyana. And the type of Guyana Burnham wanted to see, I think, was the kind of Guyana that thing. And Burnham did the things he thought he should do to put Guyana on the road to progress.
I really like those 6 things that you have outlined in relation to Forbes Burnham kind of policies. And I want to remind our viewers, like I said earlier, the lines are now open. And you can make your contribution on this program. You can ask your questions, make your comments, and we will attempt to address them on this program. I want to remind you that today we have lots of activities taking place to commemorate the birth anniversary of Forbes Burnham. We have, as we speak, the cycle race is on its way to Georgetown. They have left Linden just around 8 o'clock this morning, and they're on their way to end on Carifest on Homestretch Avenue, just out of the National Sports Commission building there. We also have our table tennis being played off today, and our softball school cricket is going on at the gymnasium. Those activities will all end this evening. This afternoon at 2 o'clock, we have the race. The third leg is continuing to Belfield and back to Georgetown. Aubrey, coming back, you have outlined these 6 things. Now,
well, I've outlined more than 6. It's
more than
6 key policies.
6 key
And then
policies.
he developed like the industrialization element of it.
Now, they all fit quite aptly in Burnham's vision for this country. They're still very relevant. Having spoken them, it sounded as if it was all hunky-dory, easy to be achieved. What was the kind of opposition that Forbes Burnham encountered in advancing or implementing these ideas that he developed for the people of this country?
First of all, when Forbes Burnham came to power, you had to deal with the PPP. That was a very violent political party. I always ask them when they talk, they seem to forget that the PPP killed Akbar Ali. They seem to forget some of the things the PPP did in that era. And Burnham had to be very stern. The other thing I think we need to know about the opposition Burnham had. Burnham had different types of opposition. Some were political parties, some were persons. I always remember a classic one. I was at a conference at the Pegasus Hotel, and a lawyer whose name I wouldn't call was ranting and raving about Burnham. And so I asked him, what is this about? And he made an interesting point. He said his problem with Burnham was Burnham put ordinary children in the same class and school with his children. Now, I say this to say to you, Burnham was also fighting an elitist mentality.
Yes.
There were
Yes.
a lot of persons. I can give you another one, I don't want to call his name, but a very eloquent lawyer stopped me on the road once, said, I admire your language and so. Where did you study? And I deliberately didn't say England. I said I studied at the University of Guyana. And he said, oh, well, how come you learn English? I mean, that is the mentality. He sees only a certain class of people and class of institutions can produce whatever. So I'm saying to you, Burnham came up against serious class interests. Don't forget, years ago, somebody looking like you used to the better chance because you're a little fairer than me. But years ago, you couldn't walk in the bank with dark complexion and got a job in the bank. Years ago, in Linden, you couldn't walk into a Tuka as an ordinary citizen, and Burnham faced the hostilities of those who believed that he was breaking down the class barriers and kind of putting people on equal footing. I remember when Burnham started to talk about functional superiority. People forget Burnham used to say, look, we are all equal, but you're the manager, you're functionally superior to me. In fact, Dr. Reed put out a booklet called Principles of Authority, which I still have, in which he sort of outlined clearly that we were all equal human beings, but that we might have different functions to form a different level, and therefore there should be the respect. One of the problems I think we faced at the time was that some people mixed up equality of opportunity and equality and failed to recognize that they had to have a hierarchy and functional authorities perform. But things like that Burnham defined, and it was all in the context of him coming up against a class system. Look, when the church controlled the school, you couldn't just walk off the road and become a teacher in the school. You had to. I don't know how true this is. I read it. I have not been able to corroborate it, but my understanding is when Dr. Jagan graduated and teach in school, he taught at an Anglican school and had to appear to be an Anglican. Now, like I said, I don't know how true it is. I've read it in more than one booklet. But the point I want to make here is we had an entrenched class system. As a little boy, I traveled on a boat called a rich car coming from Linden. And on that boat, let me start first with it. The white people had another boat, I think its name was Polaris, used to go past you. Speed, well appointed. And then on the Irish car, you had upstairs, which is first class. You had the middle and the bottom.
Which wasn't any class at all,
No
even though
class
they
at
called
all.
it that.
and legally, you couldn't go at the top there. Those things Burnham destroyed. People forget that Burnham went to see cricket. And they say he can go in, but the bodyguards can't. And I think if I remember the story clearly, he went into rails and a whole eruption occurred, and after that, they started to. So there was that institutionalized color class system that Burnham had to confront. Because by any stretch of imagination, Burnham could hope to be white
No.
or fair.
He had your complexion.
So I'm saying to you, one of the serious challenges he had was that. He also had the challenge of the colonial mentality, where people perceive that which is good and useful in the context of what Europeans said or did.
Outline. I
Yeah.
want to say, Aubrey, that those points you've mentioned is very relevant, and I want to just say, for me, I had practical experience of this kind of segregation, if I want to call it that. They were at school in the 60s. You could not have go through Bel Air Park, because I lived in Camerville. We used to use Duncan Street. And even though you claim that I would have benefited differently for jobs in the bar
Right, I
because
just
of my color,
say you stood a better chance.
I stood a better
Because you're getting
chance.
fear.
But I'm saying
You're fear.
that I had that experience. We
Yeah.
couldn't go through kind of Bel Air Park. You had to ride on Duncan Street. That was the barrier. On the right side of Duncan Street, if you're going east, that was a restricted area after certain hours of the day. And if you go through there, you stand a chance of getting yourself into trouble. I want to remind all of you that the lines are open. You can make your calls. I'll take the first call. Morning, you're on the air.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
I'm wondering what is being done to honor Elizabeth Burnham in this country. When the PDP came into office, we changed it to Mary International Airport into Chesapeake International Airport. Now we have the Burnham Court. I always wonder if this government really loves Burnham as they say. Because if you when last you passed by the Burnham Court, I mean Burnham, the Burnham Court. Is that honoring Elizabeth Burnham?
But you're talking about the basketball court at Middle
Yes.
Street?
Because that's the Burnham Court. And
Yes.
that is what is used on Elizabeth.
Let her finish.
That is not doing any honoring to Elizabeth Burnham.
Well, look,
Teddy
Benny,
has this Teddy Jacobs International Airport. When you come into Guyana, you hear of that. Now what do you hear of Burnham? You hear the Burnham Court.
All right.
When you pass there, the state of that court to match the name. I mean, I don't understand.
all right. Let me say this, a few things to you. First of all, Burnham named Timeri in honor of the Amerindian communities. The PPP changed it and named it Cherry Jagan International. It's supposed to be Cherry Jagan International Airport, Timeri,
Timeri.
but they don't mention the Timeri. Now, at the last PNC Congress, somebody came with a motion suggesting that it should be renamed. And the Congress took a position that we should leave it like that. You can't run a country. I believe the PPP was wrong to change it from Timeri. But if you go now and change it to Forbes Burnham, the PPP comes back and change it to what they want. That don't make any sense. So I believe down the line, something significant should be done. But may I point out to you, Linden, the community Linden, used to be Wismar, Christianburg, Mackenzie, and Linden people agreed and pushed it through and changed the name to Linden. So whenever we say Linden, we are really honoring Forbes Burnham. So I don't want us to become a little narrow-minded. I believe in the future, there's an advantage with an airport. Everybody coming in will hear Chelly Jargon. You have to live with that. But
I understand.
so, and the unnecessary divisions it will create. We must not be like the PPP, or else we have nowhere to go. But I do buy a general point that we need to do more to honor Burnham. But it's not as if he hasn't been honored. In fact, that we got this program is in honor of him.
Yes.
But we need a more structured approach to honoring him. And one of the areas I believe we should honor Burnham is to have all of his writings put together in one place so that children can go and read, etc. Because, look, I told a young person that when Burnham came to power, there was virtually no paved roads outside of Georgetown, Linden, and New Amsterdam. When you came by boat to Mary Docks when I was a little boy, and then you had to travel from Timmery to Georgetown, you used to be covered in red dust. And it is Burnham that do the majority of paved roads in this country. And I think when you walk in the days on the Linden Highway, the Quarantine Road, the West Demerara Highway, Burnham, you're honoring Burnham. He's the man that actually began putting paved roads outside of the main cities in this country. But people, in their dislike or in their desire to play him down,
Do the young people know all of these things that you're talking about? Because now I'm being aware of some of the things you were saying about Burnham when you were speaking just now. I was listening, and most of them are news to me. So what are you doing to bring this known? Is this being taught in the schools or in the universities, in the political science classes? What are we doing as a government to honor this man so that this is known, these things are known, what he's been doing for this country?
I think some work is being...
not attached to Burnham right now. Once you talk about Burnham, you hear about long lines and this banning and that banning. There's a stigma attached. All these good things he did. What is being done so that the younger generation in this country would know what this man is?
One of the facts we have to live with and work to change it is that the PPP has always had a destructive PR machinery. You've seen it at work at present. And what they did over the years was sort of in a structured way destroy Burnham's image. With all that people would say about Burnham, Burnham cannot be accused of amassing wealth on the Guyanese populace in the way somebody like Jamdale has done, and is still walloping his mouth when he has no moral right to speak. And so I agree with you in principle that we need to do more to honor Burnham and to put the information out there. This program is part of it, but I think we need to do much more.
Morning, you're on the air.
Yes, good morning.
Morning, sir.
I want to talk about Burnham in the sense of being an international leader.
Okay.
And the point is clearly this. No one speaks of the rich becoming richer and the poor becoming poorer, which is spoken all over the world. But no president has come up with a solution. Burnham made the solution in this country. That's why I really see Guyana as the golden arrow here to lead the world. We make a song with it. To lead the world in that part of righteousness, where he set up a system where the rich will stop being richer, because that's the question for all presidents. You want to be the president? Can you make that system stop that system from going on, where the rich keep getting rich and the poor getting poorer? Burnham did that, where he showed the poor how to rise by self-help, not depending on the rich. And that is the system of the world for the poor to rise, assisted by the government, instead of them coming and telling you they got this policy and that policy and all the policy. Then you know policy. The people need no education, no university. Burnham never come and tell them that. Even though he emphasizes university from kindergarten to university education, he showed them how. You tell them go and get a degree. Steve, you don't get your own house. And that's one of the biggest things to get. From the time you get your own house and you're paying rent, half of your salary in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Self-help is the way for poor people to do it with no money, not going to a bank. Just by the government providing the resources to build the 40 or 50 houses at a time, and the people paying back by 12, it was $12 at that time, now it could be $12,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So he showed them how to write and co-op farms and everything. It's just that people promoting wealth instead of promoting the international order of everybody having equity, as they call it. Because without equity, there will be crime. So Burnham is a world leader. And one problem I got with the PNC is that they are taking no blame concerning what happened to Burnham's policy, which they were to uphold. The only blame in the PPP was they have to take their part in making that error. Because you speak about Burnham making mistakes, and that is one of the problems they have. People like to speak about Burnham making mistakes, but they never name them. You could mention the trains. What else can you mention? Well, I don't get it. I want a list because I deal with accuracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you for calling.
All right. No one will doubt that the PNC has to take blame for some elements of it, but one has to be careful when one is doing it. For instance, I was one who argued that I felt at the time when President Hoyt began to liberalize Guyana, it was a move in the right direction, but it should have been done in a context of you ensuring that the poor in the society was taken care of. One of the dangers of liberalization in the way it was done is that I agree with you, it tends to put more wealth in the hands of the wealthy. But I know for a fact that at present there are changes that are occurring that seeks to deal with that. A lot of people don't give the Minister of Finance credit. But let me point this out to you. One of the things the Minister of Finance did was to cut out the cross, the board increase, and put grades. The lower you are, the higher the increase. So you get 8% if you are at the bottom. I think 5 or 6% the next tier. And if you are over $1 million, you don't have any increase to
nothing.
get. Now, that is one. I agree with you, we need to, in a structured way, work through how is it we are going to empower ordinary people, and at the same time don't promote the rich getting rich at the expense of ordinary people. It's an issue that has always had difficulties. Some research in China will show that China has managed to narrow the gap, but Guyana is not China. One has to look at it in the Guyanese context and in the international context as well, because you live in a world in which the minute something appears as if it is socialist, there is objection, even though, for instance, David Granger talking about a better life for all Guyanese is clearly an indication that the interest is in improving the lives of the ordinary man. What we need to do is to sit down and think it more through some more and put the mechanisms in place to ensure that poor people actually elevate themselves.
Morning, on the air.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. I know we're honoring our late president, but what about if we start to honor a man that is alive and start to doing things like bringing back, restoring our country? President David Granger. I mean, show him. Let's start showing him, because we didn't have a chance to show our late Forbes Burnham. If we can start showing President Granger some of the same acknowledgement, now that he's alive, it would be so nice, because look, he's restoring so much that we had lost. Right? And it would be so nice if we can start honoring him for at least restoring certain things, certain principles. Flag raising night was touching. It was so touching.
Okay.
So please, if we can look into this.
All right.
would like-
All I will
Thanks,
say
Bobby.
to you, virtually every program I went on that I had the opportunity, I've always credited David Granger with restoring law and order in this society and beginning the process of dismantling the criminal state that the PPP left. That's the first thing. The second thing, I spoke at a conference the other day, and I said to them in no uncertain terms, a lot of people are critical about the names you give to ministries. But I am one who support David Granger's change of Ministry of Regional Development to Ministry of Communities.
Communities.
Because it puts the focus on the community and the people in the community rather than a geographical thing called region. And so I believe that we as a party honor David Granger. But you also have got to be careful. You cannot do the kind of a policy analysis you do of Forbes Burnham while Granger is there, because first of all, his policies are evolving,
Yes.
and secondly, he is still defining. He has defined a green strategy, and just like when Burnham identified the 6 as he went along, other elements were identified. So you can honor him in a limited way, but a real honoring of a president will always occur long after he or she would have gone.
And one of
Because
the,
in large measure, you face some dangers if you try to do it in every respect while the person is alive or in office.
I just want to add to that, but you'll find people focusing on issues that are the hallmark of any leader after they are gone. Because the hallmark of a leader is creating institutions and mechanisms long after they're gone that remain decades after they have passed. And Forbes Burnham, no better example than him, because these things stands out long after he is gone. And that's one of the reasons why you cannot at this point, because like you rightly said, David Granger's policies are still evolving.
Yeah.
And
And
it has to be given
look,
time.
I believe we need a mechanism to honor all our leaders who made significant contributions. I am on record as saying I think Dr. Jagan has contributed to Guyana. We might disagree on what his contribution is among. I believe Forbes Burnham has contributed significantly to Guyana. I believe Hoyt has contributed. Now, critical for me and my thinking when it comes to your contribution, I have to assess you based on what you did. And included among what you did was whether you pillaged this treasury or not. And that is why I'm very limited in terms of the people I have respect for as a president. If you become a president and at the end of the process you're wealthy at the expense of the Guyanese people, I see no place for you to be honored. If, however, you outline policies, live a life in keeping with your policies and so, and I think you would have made a significant contribution, I will honor you. By the same
Let's take this
token, I'm
one.
saying, in recent times, we really produced nobody we could honor. This David Granger come now, and we can look and talk about honoring him.
Morning, you're on here.
Morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Up to north, the saying makes sense to me. But my thing is, you have Chenjagon Resort Center that the people be fighting for to have it on
For
the
themselves.
table. I think so. Now, we don't have any resort center about Forbes Burnham. Nobody know going on.
Could I just stop you
Listen to
here?
me. No, that's
No. You're going to have to continue. But I just wanted to say to you that as far as I know, David Granger's house that he was living has been donated, and that is being
A resort center.
for Forbes Burnham. I just wanted you to know that.
wonderful. You
The
why
opposite the culture
why I'm making
center.
that statement? I was talking in the office the other day to a friend of mine, Indo-Guyanese guy. And we were talking about Burnham, and he was saying he really don't know nothing about Burnham. And I started to explain the policies of Burnham and Burnham's vision for Guyana and so on. He said, well, boy, let me tell you the truth.
I always had a respect for this man because the things that man did in that time, Guyana's history, is what we should have been doing now. We should have been far ahead on the technological list. You know? So the young people really don't know nothing about Burnham's contribution to Guyana, what he would have done, his vision for Guyana. A lot of young people don't know. And every time you talk, I'm a big guy, right? I'm in my 60s. And every time you talk to the young people and you explain to them what Burnham did and what, you know, contributed to Guyana, they were amazed.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to not only talk, we need to like have a real PR program. A PR program.
But this is all part of the thing of promoting kind of Burnham policies and legacy.
You need that because everybody know I am not being biased. Everybody know about Cherry. As you said, they got the airport, Cherry. You got the research center, Cherry. Cherry, something on trial, the West on trial, and all kind of book. And these guys aggressively promoted. I am not saying Cherry has not contributed to Guyana. He has contributed to Guyana's history.
Yes.
You need to be honest and valid contribution, not only Burnham, not only Cherry, of all our presidents.
I agree with you fully, and I want to say to you, Arby, thank you very much for calling. I want to say that, added to that, I have been advocating for some time now on this program and other forums that we need to put together a team of historians where we should address this idea of our history, because there are different groups and individuals that they have different interpretation and information as far as our history is concerned. But we need to kind of set that right.
I agree.
And have that being taught in our schools. I have been saying that for some time, and I think that that's an issue that we...
I agree, but it's a more difficult problem than that. We can have Burnham history. We could have Dr. Jagan history. We could have Rodney history. We could have Osama and whoever little he had. The point I want to make is that until we solve the problem of being able to put together a history that is acceptable.
Well, that's why you need a team.
No, but if we, what you have at present is a situation where people see it from their standpoint.
From theirs, exactly.
But if you can go the longer step of developing a history of Guyana to teach your children. Because one of the problems we got is we stop at slavery, etc., and up to 53.
A big gap.
Because after the conflicts were so many that the people they see the same thing differently. So we probably need a properly constituted National History Council that sits and goes through those things, get political party agreements, and at some stage produce a history of Guyana that is factual,
acceptable to everybody.
Body.
That's the point I was making. That we need to have that because we teaching Caribbean history. We're not teaching Guyanese history, and that's critical. Morning on there. We just have a few minutes more. Morning, sir. You need to.
Mr. Nazim, you can't talk with all the presidents. So Jack is open his country. I don't carry all the money in his country. People get people, kill all the black people. We need to open his country. He can't no way. You can't talk with Jack, Mr. Jack, you know? Then you want to come back in his country. Come back around his country.
well,
Now put your side.
as you would note, I didn't mention Jack there at all.
Yeah.
In fact, by the construct I outline of respect, Jack they wouldn't feature.
Yeah,
Because for me, a president that must be decent, he must be honest, and at the end of his term, there should be no doubts as to whether he accumulated wealth at the expense of the Guyanese people or not. And I don't think anybody who is alive and well in Guyana will believe Jack Doe fits that bill.
Right now, I just running for running country. Because you can't hear him coming up. You said you want to get a party here, around this country here. And no way he can come back from this country.
Well, all of us will hope and work to ensure he doesn't come back. In fact, I find it.
Thank you.
I find it interesting that he even believes he should, because I think he's the worst thing this country ever had as a president.
I just have 1 minute more, Arby. Let me take this last call and then your last comments. Morning on there.
Good morning. I want to let our brief talk about the College forget Burnham, a place that called it there for people like me.
Okay.
And the other thing that is hurting people like me and many other people, the present ministers don't come out in the community, and when you want to see them, you can't see them. Most of us don't know them because they are new people, and they should come out to the community and let the people know them, and people get to have a chat to them. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much.
I agree with you, and I think that's been rectified. There's some structured outreach being planned for ministers to meet with the community. When it comes to you can't see them in the office, etc., they have to resolve that at day level.
All right, I just have a minute, according to my control operator. She's saying that just 1 minute remaining. I want to take the last call, and then Aubrey, you can make your final kind of comments. Morning, on the air.
Good morning.
Morning.
Earlier, Mr. Norton made a point about discrimination in the school stuff, but and schools. But if you go further, it happened in Catholic schools as well. Because in order to go to St. Francis College, St. Joseph, you had to be a Catholic. Your mother and father had to be Catholic.
Okay.
Even child can go to those schools. I could even go further. John Fernand, JP Services does not exist anymore. Barclays Bank, Royal Banks and Canada, they never used to employ black people. Have 6, they might didn't GC. You could have 5, 6, 7 GC. You had to work down in the back. You could not be in the counters facing the members of public. And Burnham and Jagan, more party in Burnham, they decided to end that practice. And
Yeah, that's true.
Which is a very popular place now. I'm good black people not going there. I can tell you, you couldn't go there. I could remember me mother, I passed me mother, and I watch me mother put one slap on your face, don't watch it, say the way. It was a fact, don't think that.
Well, I used to go into Guyana stores, but because then.
In Orange Walk, I'm going to engage him with that love. I'm going to give him some more information, more facts. It's probably like this, you know. It's not only intellects must get on board. You got to take some people on the street.
No, I would like to have you on the program because I've been hosting this program for the past 14 years. All right, thank you very much. Aubrey, your final thoughts.
I want to close by saying, look, I have no problem with people being critical of Burnham, but you must give him his due. And when it comes to the things that Burnham would have done, there are a lot, I think, that he would have done that no other president in this country did. And I'm saying to one and all, I acknowledge that we probably didn't do enough to popularize Burnham's policies, etc. And in the future, something that we have to do.
Okay, to my viewers, I want to say thanks for having me in your living room, kitchen, and your bathroom, wherever you have been looking at this program. We're dedicated to keeping the legacy of Forbes Burnham alive, the Forbes Burnham Foundation. Every year, we have a series of activities to commemorate his birth and his death in August 1985, the 6th of August 1985, he died. He would have been 96 years now. And we have a series of activities happening today. Our cycle race is going. We have our table tennis and softball cricket going on. We have the second leg coming down from Linden. It should be at Carifest Avenue anytime now. And then this afternoon, 2 o'clock, we are starting from Homestretch Avenue to Belfield and back. For those of you who have been with me over the years, I want to say thank you very much, and I do hope that you enjoy your Republic anniversary. 49 years, we're going to be 50 next year. Start planning for the 50 from now. So with that, I'll say thank you very much until the fourth Sunday in the month of March, when I'll be here with you once again to host this program, The State of the Nation. Thank you.